The Flight of the Eisenstein. I like this summary. We start with vessels in the void, prepare to bring the light of illumination. Leading the ships was the Endurance, followed by other Death Guard ships. Next we meet Caleb Arin, a failed aspirant of the Death Guard, and now a housecarl and equerry to the captain of the 7th Company. This part talks about how he is content with his life, looks with admiration to the Death Guard, and while he is a failed aspirant, has the same values and the same convictions as them, and would die for the Imperium. Caleb was going to the armory, proud that he was able to do that, while other members and serfs weren't allowed to. He felt that times and Astartes were changing, though. This change could be felt since the Emperor left the Crusade in the hands of Horus. We now go to the best Death Guard character out there, Nathaniel Garro, who is looking at his sword, Libertas, very pleased. He gestured to Caleb to raise, and the housecarl did just that. They talk a little about how the sword is said to predate Garro, older than him. Then 2 Death Guards come in the room, Andus Hakur and Ulius Tempter. At first, Garro and Tempter trade insults, but Garro wins and the men laugh it off. Hakur also jokes at Tementer's expense, but he has a dry tone that you would almost believe that he really was serious in what he was saying. Tementer and Garro speak a little alone, Garro not wanting to go on the Terminus Est unarmed, that being the ship of the captain of the 1st Grand Company, Calas Typhon. Olus gave the news to Nathaniel that the 1st captain is giving up command of the following attack, which surprised Garro because Typhon was too proud to give up command to other Astartes. And that's where we have the revelation that Mortarion, the Primarch, is joining them in their assault. He was gone on some important task for the Warmaster. Garro lost his composure a little. Tempter liked that. He told Garro that the assembly is taking place now and that the Primarch brought some interesting company with him. We now move to the flagship of Captain Typhus. We'll get there. In the assembly hall, Garro stood next to Tempter. Nathaniel saluted discreetly a naval officer before Tempter asked about Grulgor. Garro pointed to him with his chin, showing that the captain of the 1st and the 2nd Company were discussing. Once our pair came in, Grulgor didn't salute them. Garro and Tempter discussed how the 2nd captain doesn't like Garro at all, but he didn't care that much. Soon, the 1st and 2nd captain went to them and greeted them. Well, more like Typhon greeted them. There's tension between Grulgor and Tementer. That can be seen in Grulgor's reaction when Tementer is informed that plans have changed and his company will be doing boarding action instead of basking in the greater glory of planetary invasion. Tempter refers to Grulgor as captain, and he gets pissed. You see, in the Death Guard there are only 7 companies, though they are more numerous than their counterparts in other legions. The 1st captain has the highest rank, of course, but there are 2 more ranks of importance in the Death Guard, that of Commander for the 2nd Captain, and that of Battle Captain for the Captain of the 7th Company. A title said to be given by the Emperor during the Unification War and kept until now, so Garro was the Battle Captain, if you could imagine. If you couldn't imagine, I mean. With this knowledge, and Grulgor not liking Tempter, I guess you get why he got angry by just being called Captain. They then have a discussion about traditions and customs. Grulgor agrees that they are important as long as they are useful. To quote Tempter, hold them with one hand and push them with another. Then Grulgor picks on Caleb, the housecarl of Garro, and how that is a useless custom. Garro defends his housecarl for being capable and helpful. Grulgor mentions he had one of those, but lost it on an ice planet when he froze to death. And then, finally, after this weird interaction about the housecarl, Mortarion came with his guest. Caleb was shining Garro's equipment, and he wondered what a meeting with the Primarch would be like. We get a joke from Hakur asking if Caleb can see through steel because the Primarch can. The joke was that the Primarch can't. This joke happens after Caleb looks at the ceiling, thinking if the rumors about Mortarion are true. We also get a description of Garrow's armor that has a two-headed eagle with both eyes opened as a cuirass in front of it. That had one eye open looking to the future and another closed looking to the past. Sounds familiar? Yeah, it does. Back to Garrow. Who were the guests? The Sisters of Silence. Typhon and Grugor are disgusted at the sight of the Witch Seekers. Because, they're Sisters of Silence. They're gnolls. Anyway, apparently Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra, sent them there. There were also 2 Death Shrouds. The Death Shrouds are the elite of the Legion, and Mortarion's bodyguards, faceless and nameless, picked in secret by the Primarch himself. The members of this group never reveal their faces to anyone but Mortarion. Those picked for this position, are written off as dead, killed in action. They wield scythes made from the echo of a farmer's scythe, this being the weapon used by Mortarion on Barbarous in his youth. Grugor asks if the Death Shroud are here, where is their master? He was just skulking in the shadow like an edgy rogue in a game of D&D. Mortarion comes in front of his men, each step making that annoying noise sharpening knives make. Everybody but the Dread Shroud kneeled in front of him. Mortarion told him to rise. Silence fell on the audience. Hakur and his squad talked a little about what to do. One was in the training cages before one reads a Magos biologist's work to see how to kill their enemy, the Yorgol. The end of this part makes an interesting distinction. Hakur tells his men to act like Emperor's children, basically. Seek the perfection part, not the whole other part they're doing, but they don't know that yet. Back to the meeting, Mortarion tells his plans, and we find out the Sigillite sent help to them in the aspect of the sisters. And the plan is revealed. Garrow would be away from his Primarch. He didn't like that, but he still saluted it. Mortarion gives them a speech about how one day this race, the Yorgol, will no longer exist, and while today might not be that day, it will be enough. The Death Guard went to war in the tube world of the Yorgol. Garrow and his men made landfall by a boat. Yes, that's funny, it's boat. The fight against the Xenos was an easy one. They die left and right thanks to the Astartes. Everyone was looking with awe at Mortarion, Typhon, and the Death Shroud, cutting with ease through the enemies. Every Astartes wanted to break ranks and join their Primarch and be in his aura. Even Garrow, but of course none of them broke formation to go there. Garrow spotted above that their enemies were flying, apparently. They could do that. They were flying in and announced everyone of that. Mortarion gave him a nod and acknowledged his good sight. The Flying Yorgol put up a good fight, but Garrow got the chance to fight alongside the Sister of Silence, while trying to save her, and she tried to save him. Once they mop up the flying enemies, Mortarion gives his order to his men. Garrow and his company would go for the hatchery of the Yorgol. But that hatchery isn't just a place where larvae hatch, but also where the Yorgol get their modification. You see, this race loved modifying its body. The Flying Yorgol giving up 2 limbs for wings. They really like body modification. Well, they reached the hatchery forest of the Xenos race and found the Sister of Silence helmet. When lifted up, a head falls. Great. To our group of Space Marines comes running a group of Sisters of Silence with a gigantic Yorgol in tail. The Death Guard help the sisters in the fight. Garrow loses his bolter and the beast almost kills him. But he manages to pull all the strength he has and kill it with Libertas, his beautiful sword. The huge Xenos dies, and apparently it's revealed that he was carrying something. A baby Xenos that looked hideously mutated, even for his own kind. Garrow wanted to kill it, but the Xenos was a psyker, and, well, this gets a little bit strange. Psyker. He drew up the sword in an arc, ready to take the creature's head from its shoulders. Wait! The word struck him like a cold flood, making his arm go rigid. The ozone stink enveloped him, clouding his thoughts and tightening on his mind, just as the cyborg had coiled around his body. It reached into Garrow, searching through him as easily as he might have leafed through a book. Death Guard, it whispered, amusement in its words, so confident of your tightness, so afraid to see the crack in your spirit. Garrow tried to complete the killing blow, but he was locked tight, trapped in amber. Soon the end comes. We see tomorrow. So shall you. All your ships will wither. The mutant torso burst in a weather of blood and bone fragments as a single bolt or round tore a hole through it as big as a fist. Suddenly the haze was gone and Garrow blinked it away, as if waking from a deep sleep. He turned and found Sister Amedera Kendo at his shoulder, smoke curling from the muzzle of her gun. Her dark eyes studied him from the vision slits of her helmet. The captain stood carefully and duplicated her gesture from the lakeside, touching his armored fingertips to his heart and his brow, a sign of thank you. Then the Sisters of Battle and the Death Guard burned the whole hatchery and forest down. The Death Guard had won. In a Terran day, nothing will be left of the tube planet. The Mechanicus asked Mortarion to let them loot the technology of the Yorgal. But orders were orders, and they had to destroy everything related to the Xenos. These orders came from the Regent of Terra himself, Malkador, and by extension of his position and will, the Emperor. On his ship, Garrow looked in the void at the ships and thought about the Sisters, and how the authority of the Emperor was above that of a Primarch. And what would it mean if there was ever conflicting orders between the Emperor and the Primarch? But surely, he thought, such a thing was impossible. The leaders of the Sisters came in with another woman, her translator behind her. When I'm saying leader, I'm referring to Kendo. They salute each other, and Garrow learns that Sisters in training do not take the oath of silence, and because of that, they can speak. So the translator was a Sister in training. Kendo says that what happened with the Yorgal, what Garrow and his men saw, must not be discussed further. Garrow then understands why the Sister shot the Xenos in the chest and not the head. He promises they will keep silence about this. They will be silent about it. Then came the important question. The Sister asks if the Xenos spoke to him. Garrow replies that he had no mouth. Then the Sister makes a gesture, putting a finger to her lip and then moving it to her temple. The novice asks again, and Garrow tells her what the Xenos said, that everything he worshipped will die, that it can see tomorrow, and so on. Garrow rebukes this by saying he's an Astartes. He worships nothing when Kendo asks him if he believes it. The Silent Sister is pleased with the answer. The novice tells Garrow that he and his men would have their names presented to the Sigillite in gratitude for their service. Garrow asks about a wounded sister that was saved by his apothecary, Voyen. And we are introduced here to the black ships of the Sisters. The vessels of the Sisters of Silence that leave Garrow in awe. The Sisters take their leave as Garrow still looks at their ships. Of course, Kendo tells him that she's good, she's safe. Caleb was pushing a car with the captain's equipment. He saw the other Space Marines talk about battles. The Death Guard were interesting. They were not as stern-faced as the Imperial Fist, but they were more serious than others from other legions. At some point, he saw Grulgor and another Astartes, brother Morki. That name isn't gonna mean anything. And he sees the second captain give a token to Morki. Grulgor, of course, sees him and starts mocking him. And really, we find out here that the Death Guard aspirants need to endure a trial of 7 days to become members of the Legion. Not all make it, some die in the process, some survive but give up and don't become Astartes. The House Carol is a position that's more interesting. It's a custom from old Terra itself. A custom that, as we already know, Grulgor hates. Of course, we find this out as the second captain mocks Caleb, calling him a spy for Garrow and a coward for not getting the Emperor's mercy. And because, Garrow decided to save and spare Calabarin. But don't worry, Apothecary Voyan comes to his defense and the second captain backs down. He escorts Caleb to the serfs that take Garrow's weapons and armor. On the way there, Caleb can't help himself but speak of what he sees in the dark. Hooded figures meeting in secret. He thinks there is sedation in the Legion. But the apothecary tells him not to worry and that the lodges are not a problem. Yes, it was a talk about the lodges. After the weapons are left, the two go to a quiet corner where Caleb voices his doubts and displeasure about the lodges. But the apothecary grabs him by the shoulder and applies a little pressure, telling him this isn't a matter to worry the battle captain. Caleb asks how can he be so sure. The apothecary simply responds, I can't say. Garrow is with his men now. He wants to chastise one of them about going into melee when the battle was not supposed to be so. Decius. But the Astartes got already chastised by Hakur. Some more discussion and Garrow wants to hold a speech. When he does, all his battle brothers kneel in front of him. Strange. But when he turns back, he sees that behind him was their Primarch, Mortarion. In honor of his good work, Mortarion wants to reward him with one of the customs of old. And it's an interesting custom of the Legion to be sure. They will drink poison and survive to prove the indomitable will of the Legion and its members. It wasn't just simple poison, but a cocktail of poisons, some that Garrow knew and many others he didn't. Nevertheless, he drank it. Despite his Astartes physiology trying to refuse it. He didn't want to look weak and this was an honor for any Astartes and the Death Guard. Decius himself looked at Garrow and imagined himself in that position. Once Garrow drank it, he could feel his body fighting the poison. Mortarion tells his son to walk it off with him. And once they reach a bridge, Mortarion talks about the need of unity in the Legion, how Garrow is respected by all men of the Legion. He even talks about a place where one can speak freely without caring for rank or position. Garrow knows what he's referring to and asks if he's talking about the lodges. Mortarion wants to know why Garrow didn't join. Garrow answers, much in the same way Caleb did, at the prospect of the existence of the lodges. The fact that the Emperor operates on the truth and secrecy is not needed, and it's even counterintuitive to the whole idea of the Great Crusade. Nevertheless, Mortarion accepts that and thanks him and tells Garrow he has an order for him. They will go to the Isvan system, meet with the Warmaster, and Garrow will act as the equerry of Mortarion. Fulgrim and Angron will also be there, with their legions. Since Typhon was going to be doing something else, somebody had to take his place. And no better than Garrow himself. Garrow considers this a great honor, not only to act as the representative of his Primarch and his legion, but to be in the presence of the Warmaster himself. This isn't going to end badly and make the prophecy of the baby Xenos come true at all. Don't worry, it won't. Next, we take a look at the second company, in their ship watching the tube world of the Yorgal going into a sun. That was one of their plans to send the tube world into a sun. I guess that works. It's a good way to end the race. Grugor was angry at Garrow. Typhon comes to him to inquire why. And we find out Grugor hates him because he's Terran-born. And compared to Demeter or Huron Hall, a dreadnought from his company, Garrow thinks it makes him superior, even implying that Garrow is more loyal to the Emperor than to Mortarion. They exchange a few more words that make Grugor angry. And finally, Typhon asks him if he would follow his Primarch's orders instead of those above him. At first, Grugor thinks he's referring to Malcador, but Typhon corrects him and says, above that. Grugor says he is loyal to Mortarion first, and the Emperor second. Typhon says this kind of thinking is appreciated in the times to come. Grugor asks about Garrow and, well, a man like Garrow would be important on their side. That is why their Primarch is going to keep a close eye on him. Should he refuse, Typhon would need a blunt weapon. This pleases Grugor, and the second company thanks Typhon for his counsel. Mortarion and Garrow reach the meeting spot. Garrow wants to go as soon as possible, but Mortarion needs to teach him about the politics of the Primarchs and how he needs to let his brothers go first without angering them. On the Stormbird to the Warmaster's ship, the Vengeful Spirit, Mortarion presents to Garrow the reason they are there, and he gives him a pic recording, telling that the governor of Ishvan III has gone rogue, going against the Imperium, thanks to some idol worshippers. The Death Guard are there because it was one of their ships that found this information. Garrow looks at the pic recording and hears the voice of a woman talking about a war singer, something along the lines, terrible tragedies and quite disturbing stuff. They reach the Vengeful Spirit, and Garrow would learn that even the Primarchs are not above pettiness. Garrow considers that to be a good thing. Having them be too close to godhood would make forget them this is the Imperium of mankind and not the Imperium of Astartes. On the way to the meeting, Garrow sees a hooded figure run around in the shadows. On their way there, Garrow also asks about the Remembrancers. And true, this was an important event. There should be there. 4 legions, 4 Primarchs gathered together. This was an important event. Many Astartes, of course, were not fond of the artists on their ships, but many just barely tolerated them. Garrow didn't care much for them, but he understood why the Emperor thought it was a good decision. Mortarion tried to be far away from them. In general, he was kinda edgy like that. But the Primarch explained an accident happened, and stricter measures were made for their safety. In truth, they would not be needed to immortalize this event, because history itself would do it. And they continue on their way. In Lupercal's court, he would see that Fulgrim wasn't there. Like Mortarion said, Garrow felt a strong desire to kneel in front of Horus, but managed to stay up. Angron and Karn were there. Garrow recognized Gabriel Loken and Torgadon while looking at the Emperor's court, the members of the Mournival, Aximand and Abaddon too. Garrow served with Gabriel once, and he thought there was something strange with the other members of the Sons of Horus. They were split into parts, Torgadon and Loken on one side and Aximand and Abaddon on the other. He recognized that the Emperor's children sent Lord Commander Eidolon, a pompous, cruel person, to represent them. Horus would give a speech about Ishvan and its fall. When Horus pointed to Mortarion, Garrow would relay the picture recording to those gathered. When the recording played, he looked for the reaction of those around him, of which only Loken seemed disturbed. Horus would give his orders to the legions and how they would make a decisive strike against the traitors that turned from the Emperor's light. And for what it's worth, Garrow agreed with the plan. It was a good idea. After the meeting was done, Mortarion went to speak with Angron. Back then, he could speak with him. Garrow was alone until an Emperor's children came to him. It was Saul Tarvitz, one of the few men outside the Death Guard Garrow would call brother. They were honor brothers. They talk about how Tarwitz went up in the world now, becoming a captain, and how their companies would be part of the same assault. It's a nice conversation between friends, and they crack some jokes about Eidolon and his pride, and after that, they part ways. On the Death Guard ship, Garrow's men were playing Regicide and talking. It's quite a peaceful scene where we see the Death Guard act as humans, and the Astartes in general. Apothecary Voyen comes and tells them of what the plans for the operation on Ishvan are. But there is a slight problem. How does he know? Garrow and Mortarion aren't back. There is no way for the apothecary to know this. So one of the veteran, Hakur, asks Voyen, how does he know that? Talkative astropath? And all he can say is, I can't say. The veteran asks what he holds in his hand. Voyen refuses at first, but the veteran twists his hand, revealing a brass icon with a skull and a star. Yep, a symbol of the lodges. The Space Marines there are surprised and revolted. Garrow did not approve of the lodges. A discussion about the necessity of the lodges happened. Voyen really thinks it's a good idea because there are some things an Astartes would say to his lodge mate that he wouldn't to his apothecary. Still, this doesn't change the fact that apparently military information is being shared in them, the veteran Astartes said. Some more talk where Voyen says the veterans aren't his kinsmen if they think less of him for being a lodge member. And guess who appears? Not Mortarion, but that would be funny. Garrow. Garrow chastises him for making their brotherhood cheap. Voyen says something interesting that he made the choice that was best for Merrick Voyen. Then he asks if Garrow will send him away. But he lets him pick what is best for Merrick Voyen. If he stays, though, he has to swear to destroy that coin, that icon of the lodges, should the lodge ever make him turn from the face of the Emperor. And Voyen swears it. With that done, Garrow held a meeting with his cadre about what will happen. None asked why Voyen was still there, but the apothecary didn't speak. After that was done, we get Garrow thinking about his home, Terra. We get some information about the Death Guard of old, when they were known as the Dusk Raiders, because they would attack at nightfall. They have their right arm painted red to symbolize the red right hand of the Emperor. We get the revelation that there aren't many Terran-born Marines left in the world. Once the last one of them died, Garrow feared a part of the noble spirit of the Legion would die too. Garrow was homesick, basically. Now we jump to the battle on the snow world of Isvan Extremis, where the Death Guard laid in wait before attacking. The first attack went well. They managed to overpower the defenders in their fortress. The arrival of the Emperor's children also made things manageable. But a woman was floating in the air, power surging from her. Garrow recognized her. The name that was spoken on the transmission about the Ishvan rebellion. A name that brought doom to many. Warsinger. Garrow went to the Warsinger to silence her cursed song. The melee-loving, always chastised Space Marine Decius tried to help his captain. But the Warsinger sang her blasted song as Garrow tried to cut through her with Libertas, hitting him with a sound hammer and turning things around. And Decius would wake up wondering how he survived, and he realized it was Garrow that saved him. He looked around for his captain, and he saw that Saul Tarwitz was next to him. Garrow told Saul to finish what they started. Decius knew Garrow needed help, but the captain wanted to fight, and so the young Astartes obliged to help his captain until he couldn't fight anymore, basically carrying him so he could shoot and try to kill things with his sword. Unfortunately, Garrow kinda lost a leg there, so it wasn't looking his favor. After he couldn't fight anymore, Decius laid him down and went for an apothecary. Decius was among those that hated Voyen for being a lodge member, and as fate has it, he finds Voyen and asks for his help. Voyen tried to justify that Garrow is still his captain, no matter if he is a lodge member. But Decius couldn't care less about that right now. More traitors came from everywhere, and a group was formed around Decius and Voyen that, helps them reach Garrow. Next to Garrow stood an apothecary of the Emperor's children. Once Decius, Voyen, and their group came to them, Voyen told him to leave his captain's side. But the Emperor's children justified that he saved Garrow's life. They still had to carry him to a Medicae, but still, he was alive. Decius presents himself and offers the gratitude of his company, but the apothecary refuses it, and presents himself as none other than Fabius Bile before he leaves. Well, just Fabius back then. Voyen is angry at that, but Decius brings him back to reality because they have to carry their captain. This part follows Garrow as he descends into death, and he wonders about lives spared and taken. A dark storm gathers around him, showing a pyramid of skulls, 3 black discs, and bullet holes. A woman's voice comes and basically tells him the Emperor protects as he comes back to life. Caleb screams that it's a miracle, the captain lives. Ulis Demeter came to see Garrow, and when he entered he saw Caleb being a little bit jumpy. He realized that he caught the house carol doing something wrong, but he decided to ignore it. Garrow wakes up and the 2 captains talk a little to raise Garrow's morale, and Garrow lost a leg, so now he has a bionicle leg. And then Garrow finds out about the pacification of Isfahan and how it isn't over yet. Somehow. Yeah, the Warmaster made squads for the next Spirit Tip that will fight against the traitorous governor and his army on Isfahan III. Demeter was picked among them, while Garrow was declared not fit for the battle line by the apothecaries and Typhon himself. Garrow didn't want to take this and decided to get up from his medical bed and have a word with it. Caleb was shocked to see his master rise, but he knew deep inside Garrow was of purpose, and going on the same path he was. For you see, Caleb read the Lectitio Divinatus, or I'd like to call it, because it sounds cooler, Lectitio Divinatus. And he was a believer in the God Emperor of mankind, even having a little icon at his neck that represented the Emperor, a brass icon. Garrow made his way furiously to his Primarch's quarters, only to find out from Grulgor, who was standing there, that Mortarion was gone and Typhon was inside. Garrow still proceeded in and demanded to be sent on the planet with his company. He can still lead. Typhon told him that the orders also came from Mortarion for him to stay put. While Grulgor wanted to gloat over Garrow, he found out he was also assigned to stay on board, which of course, as you can imagine, he didn't like. Of course, the second captain protested this, but Typhon made himself clear and told the both of them will be jointly cooperating things from orbit. Garrow's fury settled and he became his usual self. Garrow left and Grulgor remained at the orders of his first captain, and he found out why. Isfahan III might be the turning point, as Grulgor puts it, but Typhon isn't sure Garrow will join the Warmaster's banner. So Grulgor has a special mission on board. Garrow and his men were in the armory, and there they were preparing the frigate, or to embark the frigate, the Eisenstein. Dementen and the others led the first charge against the traitors. The Death Guard will be the first to step foot on the planet. Alongside him ran Huron Fall, the mighty dreadnought. While the first enemies fell quickly, the sound in the air became more melodic, if you will. But the Demeter already knew from reports about the war singers. Grulgor and Garrow reached the frigate. The second captain already tried to impose his superiority over the ship's crew. It didn't take long that Grulgor took his men to inspect the lower decks. Garrow gave his orders to his men to find suitable billets for them and come with him. Voyen did not trust the second captain, but Garrow dismissed his fears. In truth, Garrow held the same feeling though, and wonder if this is how things have changed. To look at your battle brother with suspicion. There is rivalry among the Astartes, but then there is enmity. Garrow was sensing something, but he didn't know what. On the planet, Tempter and his men had problems with a huge cannon the defenders were using. But don't worry about that. The Titan Legio Mortis was there to help them out. Quite a beautiful sight to see that giant walk above you and not crush you. On the ship, Garrow and his men reached the command bridge. Some talks about the ship being as old as Garrow. They joined the Crusade at the same time, so the 7th captain already had something in common with the ship. Garrow knew that the humans of the ship tried to not look at his limp, because as you know, the whole prosthetic cybernetic leg. Orders came from Mortarion that the vessel was supposed to switch positions. Initially, it was supposed to be at the outer edge to stop any fleeing ship from, leaving the system. But it was changed now to be positioned above Chloral City, the capital of Ishvan III, the one attacked by the other members of the Legion. Garrow found this suspect, and through such a position would be perfect for an orbital bombardment or drop pod assault. But the first was denied by the Warmaster when Angron proposed it, and they were not equipped for the second. Decius could feel he was troubled and asked him if something was wrong. Of course, in a subtonal way, so the crew wouldn't hear them speak. Garrow admits that he feels something is wrong, but he didn't know what. Caleb was ordered to oversee the serfs unloading the cargo of the 7th Company, but his bravado grew, and using his abilities to stay unseen, he saw the members of the 2nd Company and his serfs, and, he followed them to see what their cargo was. Oh boy. Initially, they were just metal boxes, but once they reached a place, they got unloaded, and he saw that the boxes contained glass shells filled with green vomit-like liquid. During his follow, he saw one Astartes from the 2nd Company backhand a foreman, that was Battle Captain Battle Brother Morky from earlier. He backhanded the foreman because the serfs almost tripped over one of those boxes. There was also Grugor, and Caleb's bravado disappeared. He wanted to run to his master, but he tipped over a servitor. And of course, as you can imagine, that made a pretty annoying sound. Morky came from his hiding place, and the house Carol ran as far as he could. But he didn't get that far because at some point he met a dead end. Still, it was dark enough to not be seen in. He knew his end was near, so he prayed to the Emperor as the Death Guard was coming closer to him. Surprisingly, the Emperor responded, and he got saved by Voyen, who dragged him upwards. The apothecary told Caleb to shut up, and once the Space Marine left that place, they started to talk. Voyen told him that those are containers that held the Life Eater virus, an extreme weapon only to be used in the cases of the most foul of Xenos. Voyen told the House Carol to run and tell Garrow, and so Caleb did. On the deck, they saw a group of Emperor's Children Thunderhawks, with one of them leading the formation, and the ones in the back shooting at it. Strange. A message came from Lord Commander Eidolon, who ordered the Thunderhawk that was leading them to be shut down since they have gone rogue and against the orders of the Warmaster. Once the ship got close to the Eisenstein, everybody waited for Garrow's orders, and he ordered a link connection to the fleeing ship. He wouldn't just open fire on another Astartes for no reason. Once the link was made, Garrow and his men were shocked to hear who was speaking to them. It was Saul Tarvitz. Some believed that this was impossible. The captain was an honorable man. If he has gone traitor, then the galaxy went insane. Decius said, "Perhaps it has." Everybody on board couldn't believe what was happening. Garrow demanded answers from his honor brother. Saul told them on his life that they are betrayed. The fleet will bombard the planet's surface with virus bombs, and every Astartes down there will die. Garrow took manual command of the Eisenstein's guns and shot. To everybody else, it looked like Garrow shot Saul. The veteran Astartes on deck discussed in low tone about this. Opinions on this were split on whether this was a good decision or a bad one. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. But in the end, they came to the conclusion that Garrow didn't shoot at Saul, but at the ships following him. Decius decided to ask his captain what and why he did it. Going to the Vox room, he saw his captain being somber. When asked what is wrong, Garrow told him a storm is coming. Decius doubted Garrow and his trust for Saul, because Decius didn't know the man. But Garrow did, and he let his temper get the best of him, grabbing Decius by the gorget and telling him he does know Saul, and his word is worth 1,000 of eidolons. Then, in a stroke of genius, the realization came that, well, this act was too big to be done by the Warmaster alone. Others would have been into the plan for it to work at this scale. Yet the idea of Horus, beloved by all, just turning traitor, was unimaginable. The word betrayal coming hard to say, becoming even harder to think of. Garrow also thought about the words of Mortarion, about how the Astartes need unity, or else they will falter. Caleb comes rushing in as Garrow was having an existential crisis, and tells him of the virus bombs him and Voyen found. Garrow asked to be taken to the hangar. Voyen watched the second company prepare the virus bombs. Garrow, one veteran, and Caleb came to him. Garrow gets confirmation on the virus bomb situation, and goes down to confront Grulgor. They exchange words, unpleasant and unconvincing. Basically, Grulgor is loyal to the Death Lord and the Warmaster, considering that the Emperor abandoned them. He also hated the high positions humans were left in when he considered they should be left to rule, the Astartes. So a fight begins. Garrow draws first blood, killing another space marine. On the deck there, besides the space marines, there were also servants of the ship who joined the most numerous side in this fight. It wasn't Garrow, as you can imagine. And since they weren't dumb enough to pick a fight with, the Astartes, they chose to attack Caleb. The serf fought them off as best he could until he got his hands on a stub pistol and killed his attackers. Caleb saw Grulgor was pointing his bolt pistol at Garrow, and he knew this couldn't be allowed. Garrow must not die. He is of purpose. So with a prayer to the Emperor, he shot at Grulgor's gun. Which, let's imagine, it's a stub pistol. It doesn't do that much. And that's a bolt pistol, held by an Astartes. It's kind of useless to do that. It didn't do much, as you can imagine. But it moved the bolt pistol a little. And that was enough to save Garrow's life. Then, with the supernatural speed of an Astartes, Grulgor killed Caleb by throwing a knife at him, and the knife plunged well into his chest. What happened to the second captain's stray shot? That's a good question. What happened with that shot that missed? It went through one of the glass ceilings of the virus bombs, releasing the virus and killing the crew closest to it. Garrow went to Caleb, and the housecarl told Garrow he is of purpose, before saving Garrow and his men by sealing himself with the dying death guards and serfs, but not before giving Garrow his tracts from the Lectitio Divinatus and his brass icon of the Emperor. Then we move to the deck. On the deck, Garrow came after Voyen, and the veteran, and told his men they will become traitors. He goes on to explain everything that happened in the gun deck with Grulgor, of how the Warmaster is responsible, and, of course, their Primarch is as well. Still, Grulgor had men that survived and would be asking questions. A veteran would be dispatched to take care of that. Hakur, of course. The plan Garrow had was to flee. The Eisenstein was just one frigate. They couldn't provide proper support to the troops below or engage the Warmaster. So fleeing was the best option. Once that was done, he wanted to swear an oath of moment. But he was interrupted by a Vox officer with a message for Grulgor from Typhon. A message that read that the bombarding was imminent and he should get rid of the object standing in his way. They swear their oath, including the shipmaster and his second-in-command, and leave their duties. Decius tells his captain that's all fine and dandy, with a good speech and all, but who would bear witness to everything? Garrow responds, the Emperor. One thing I forgot to mention is the fate of Saul Tarvitz in this, because after Garrow blows up the leading or the following Thunderhawks, it is heavily presumed by the other Astartes, and I guess Garrow himself, that Saul will join in the fight down below on Ishvan 3. Good, with that out of the way, let's continue. Garrow was in his room, as his men were cleaning the ship of the remains of the Second Company. He stood and mourned his lost brethren, his former housecarl. Looking through Caleb's belongings, Garrow finally realized that Caleb was a worshipper of the cult of the Emperor. He also had in his possession not only tracts of the Lectitio Divinatus, but a whole book. So, left with no hope, Garrow starts reading it, and after reading it, still hopeless but now a believer, he prays to the Emperor for a solution. Then he hears the voice of a woman that begs for Garrow to save them. It was a strange feeling, the same as the Yorgal one was. But this time, invading his mind was not the little Xenos, but a much warmer, calmer voice. Decius comes into his room furious, and Garrow tries to hide his writings. Decius sees that the captain is putting some papers in his pouch, but Garrow tells him to report. He told the battle captain that they encountered resistance, but put down Grulgor's men. Inside him, he hated that he had to do it, and he wondered that maybe only Garrow was supposed to be killed, and thought if he would have to pick a side, he would probably pick his captain's side. He might have, but not getting the choice was not a good thing. It was not something he liked. Garrow tells him to say what he has to say, and Decius tells him how horrible he sees this, to kill Astartes' brothers. Garrow calls them traitors that picked the Warmaster over the Emperor. Decius then says it wasn't his call. He isn't the Warmaster, neither is he a Primarch or a First Captain. And finally, he tells Garrow to ask himself, what if Horus is right? Battle alarms start to ring right after he said that, so we don't really get to see Garrow whooping his ass. On the planet of Ishvan, we go to Tementre, who is asking his brother with the Vox, what did they have? Apparently everything was messed up, they couldn't really get proper messages, but they did intercept a message from Lucius, from the Emperor's children, to some sons of Horus, something about a bioweapon. Tementre didn't know anything related to that. After all, it wasn't in the mission debrief that the Ishvan army had those abilities. And then, the Titan that was so much helping them stopped shooting and stopped working. Tementre scanned him over with his sight and saw no reason why it would just stop. But the coolants of the Titan were not open, which they were supposed to be to, eliminate the gases. And then he realized when he looked at the sky, it was yellow trails of white, and they were coming down. Squad-wide comms, he ordered, and told everyone to disengage and go to the bunkers. Huron Fall, of course the mighty dreadnought, asked who had done this. And while there was no time to explain, Tementre knew of only one man that would give that order. Garrow and Decius go on the deck and saw the orbital bombardment of Ishvan 3. Back on the planet, Tementre was guiding his men to the bunker. And I will leave you with this excerpt of this part, because it's so good. Who betrayed us? He asked himself, echoing the aged dreadnought's question. Why, in Terra's name, why? Ulis, barked the old warrior, stomping to his side. Get in there. We have only a few seconds. No, he retorted. My men first. Idiot, growled Huron Fall, throwing protocol to the wind. I will stay. Nothing will be able to crack my hide. You go now. He shoved Tementre with his colossal manipulator claw. Go inside, damn you. Ulis Tementre stumbled back a step, but his gaze was still on the sky. No, he said, just as flickers of bright, brilliant light turned the day a glittering white. At high altitudes overhead, The first wave of the virus warheads detonated in a series. A wall of airburst instantly unleashed a black rain of destruction. The viral clads, capable of hyper-fast mutational change and near exponential growth rates, feasted on native airborne bacteria. The thin, dark bloom of the death cloud rolled out over the chloral city, just as the second wave fell. The shells did not explode until they hit the ground, bursting to smother city districts, open fields, and trench lines with tides of destructive haze. The Life Eater did as it had been engineered to do. Where a molecule of it touched an organic form, it spread instantly, putrefying death. The chloral city, every living thing, every human, animal, plant, every organism down to the level of microbes was torn by the virus. It leapt boundaries of species in a second, burning out the life of the planet. Flesh rotted, and blood became ooze. Bones shredded and turned brittle. Ishvanians and Astartes alike died, screaming, united in death by the unstoppable germs. Tempter saw the warriors running towards him, dying on their feet. Figures fell to the mud as their corpses turned to a red broth of fleshy, slurry, vicious fluids sweeping from the chinks in their power armor. He knew that he had dallied too long, and he shouted with all his might, "Close the hatchet! Close it!" The men in the bunker did as he told them. Even as he tasted blood in his mouth and felt his skin prickling with budding lesions, the metal door slammed shut and hissed with a pressure seal, locking him out. Tempter hoped they had been quick enough. With luck, they would not have taken any of the virus inside with them. He managed 2 stumbling steps before he fell, the muscles in his legs singing with agony. Huron caught him. "I told you to run, you fool." The captain flung off his helmet with a final agonized gesture of defiance. It was useless now, the virus having moved effortlessly through the breather grill and into his lungs. His hand flailed at the metal flank of the dreadnought and traced a runo of dark fluid. Even through the pain, Tempter understood. There was a small fracture in the old warrior's ceramite casing. Not enough to have slowed him on the battlefield, but more than the virus needed to reach inside the dreadnought's hull and savage the remnants of flesh inside. "You lied." "Veteran's prerogative," came the reply. "We'll go together then, shall we?" Huron asked, embracing Tempter's body to him, moving swiftly away from the bunker. It took every last effort from Tempter to nod. Blinded now, he could feel the tissues of his eyes burning and shriveling in his head, the soft meat of his lips and tongue dissolving. Huron systems were on the verge of shutdown as he stumbled to a safe distance, skidding to a halt. "This death," rasped the Vader. "This death is ours. We choose it. We deny you your victory." With a single burning nerve impulse, the mind of the warrior at the heart of the dreadnought uncoupled the governor controls on his compact fusion generator and let it overload. For a moment, there was a tiny star at the battered plains outside Chloral City, marking 2 more lives lost within a maelstrom of murder. Boy, does this Ishvan thing really get tragic the more you read into it, I'm gonna be honest. But alas, that is the tragedy of the Horus Heresy. Garrow asked Decius if this was proof enough, and then Horus's flagship appeared to shoot at the planet and the capital city. Garrow explains that the dead bodies would leave gas behind, and burning them was a proper good idea to erase everything. He thought of Tempter and Saul and hoped they would survive the final assault. The vengeful spirit came and prepared to shoot at the planet. A match to tinder, as Decius puts it. Garrow was called on the main deck. They had problems. The captain of the Eisenstein sent a message to the first captain, telling him that a problem made it so they couldn't fire on the planet. Some tensions on the ship between the captain and the Vox officer, and Garrow comes in. The problem was that a Thunderhawk from the Sons of Horus was coming to them. And they just couldn't blow this one up like they did earlier, without, alerting the entire fleet of seeing it. Garrow decides to take a precaution, and a good one, and talk to the ship. Yakton Cruz presented himself. I know it's not Cruz, it's Kurz or whatever. I'm not pronouncing that, I'm calling him Yakton. Yakton presented himself, saying he is formerly of the Sons of Horus. Quite a mystery indeed. Everybody was wary of this Yakton and his Thunderhawk, but Garrow told them to let them in. There are refugees on that ship, and she is with them. Who is she? We don't know yet. Garrow and his men are in the bay to welcome the newcomers, prepared and armed. Garrow was the only one unarmed, though. Yakton steps out and presents himself, and he tells Garrow that Loken told him to protect these refugees, and mentions that he is of the Luna Wolves Legion. The refugees then come out. First, Kirill Cinderman, then a remembrancer, and finally a person Garrow knew. Technically, Euphrati Keller. They each present themselves. Keller tells Garrow that he has the same eyes as Loken. Garrow takes it as a compliment and orders his men to keep the civilians safe. Yakton asks what is the plan, and one of Garrow's men answers to punch out the formation and warp jump. Yakton comments that is much like the Death Guard, and that man replies it's much like his legion. They exchange nods and prepare for their next step. The ship moved to the planet as they turned to night. The Eisenstein somehow managed to be out of formation, but the crew knew that leaving through stealth is going to be harder than they initially prepared for. Our heroes on board the Eisenstein looked at the captain work his magic. They couldn't leave because the sun of the system was blocking their jumping capabilities. So after some more work, the captain came with another solution. They were in the rear of the fleet formation because they called in a defect with the engines. This let the captain plot another course that wouldn't light them up like a Christmas tree should the Warmaster see them leaving. The problem with this path was that he had to make an arc in front of one of the ships. A big ship, for that matter. The Terminus Est. Weird name. The ship of Callus Typhon. Typhon was happily playing with his Man Reaper sight, cleaning it. He was happy because the secrets that he had read from Erebus were going into motion. The Warmaster and his Primarch would follow into what him and Erebus started. Soon he will come out of the shadows of his Primarch. But then he wondered, what's happening with Grugor? Typhon manipulated the second captain in his hatred against Garrow and even corrupted the lodges of the Death Guard through him. So he knew him well, and especially his desire to boast about his achievements. And he didn't get anything from him regarding Garrow. Typhon then asked a servitor to tell him of all the comms of the Eisenstein. The servitor comes back and tells the first captain that Grugor transmitted they had a weapons problem, and then they got an engine problem. Typhon asked about where the ship was, and he learned that it was in the back of the formation. Typhon then asked for a voice call to the ship, a direct line. Max, the Vox officer who was a bit of a problem earlier with the captain, on the Eisenstein had big dreams to be the shipmaster of his own cruise. His ambition got him to this recent position on this ship of the Death Guard, but he had doubts, big ones, about Garrow and the current situation. In his eyes, this was treachery, what they were doing. His colleagues from the Terminus S waited for him to pick up the line. With a sense of purpose, he picked up the Vox and told his counterparts of everything, hoping that if the ship wouldn't be destroyed, he would get to serve on the Warmaster's ship as a reward. Typhon found out about this and ordered all weapons to intercept the Eisenstein. The serf asked Typhon what should he respond to the communication officer. Typhon tells him to offer his and the Warmaster's gratitude and asks to be linked with Malgorhust. It's a weird name. The Terminus S was prepared to shoot at the Eisenstein. The crew of Garrow's ship prepared to start their maneuvering. It was now or never. Decius asked how could Typhon had known. Maybe it was a coincidence. Garrow told him there is no such thing. When he looked at the Vox officer, he could tell from his pale and sweaty face he betrayed them. The Vox officer said he serves Horus until death, and Garrow made sure that to be true by twisting his neck. Typhon shot at them at first. It was a miss, but the second one was a hit. Garrow's ship got hit. One part of it was now open to the void. But as the Terminus S got closer to them, they tried to avoid it. Malgorhust and Typhon got connected. The son of Horus is annoyed that Typhon disturbed him and asks him what is he doing that his ship is breaking formation. The son of Horus and the Death Guard were not on the best of terms. After, a little protocol disagreement. And Typhon generally didn't like Malgorhust. Typhon tells him of everything and that he is following Garrow. After a back and forth, Malgorhust leaves Typhon to deal with this. Typhon orders his crew to follow the Eisenstein to the moon of Ishvan. Typhon followed and shot at them, but the closer they got to the moon, the more the morale of Garrow's crew grew. Using the moon's gravitational pull, they managed to slingshot themselves further, while the Terminus S in its slower movement could barely avoid collision with the moon. On the Eisenstein, they discussed about the warp jump. There have been rumors of turbulence in the warp. The navigator's aids were going off the walls about the darkness in the warp. The Garrow field also couldn't be activated at full power. Decius made a few snark comments and Garrow told him if he has nothing to contribute, then he can go below decks. He expected Decius to back down, but apparently he refused, calling this plan folly. Just in that moment, Killer appeared, and she seemed to Garrow as an ephemeral vision. She told Garrow they need to do a leap of faith. He agreed, and the order to warp jump was given. They made a jump. Now they were in the warp. The crew cheered, but the captain told them to not be so hastily. Garrow asked when they will reach their destination. The captain told him this is the warp, so it might take days or hundreds of years. Reports came in of trouble from the navigator's chambers. The loyalist Death Guard get their first contact with the warp and, more specifically, Nurgle. One of the navigator's adjutants went crazy because of the warp and started to self-mutilate just as never-born creatures came out of the walls, tearing apart the space marines that were going there. Garrow, Decius, and others would come to the rescue of their brothers, and once the Neverborn were gone, the adjutant threw herself on Garrow's sword, saying the end is coming. Then Garrow looks at his men, and their armor turns a sickly green. The star and skull of their legion changes to 3 discs, and in front of him Mortarion appears, looking grimly, beckoning Garrow to join them. He refuses and then wakes up from his vision, telling his men this is far from over. Bad news now come from the gunnery deck, because while they were passing through the warp, a certain shadowy figure looked at the ship and decided to play a prank on them. The gunnery deck was filled with the corpses of those killed by the Life Eater virus. Cleaning up the dead was the last of the concerns Garrow and his men had. Well, the doors of the gunnery rusted, apparently, and out of it came the zombies. Groups of servitors of those dead humans that died thanks to the Life Eater virus, now reanimated. And behind them, the visions Garrow saw made manifest. When Garrow and his men came there, they saw the sight and they got repulsed by it immediately. Grugor and his men were very much alive, and when Garrow asked what was he now, Grugor answered that better, and that Typhon was right. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Caleb was also a walking zombie at that point, and Garrow had to put him out of his misery. Kinda sad. The two death guards, meaning Garrow and Grugor, start fighting each other, as do their sides. One junior warrior gets killed, and Garrow revenge kills the Plague Marine. Okay, he doesn't really kill the Plague Marine, because even if the Plague Marine was bleeding, he got up and continued his advance and his fight. Their style of fighting mimicking that of the Death Guard, but now even worse because they couldn't die. Decius fought some walkers and it was going good, except for the fact that whatever he cut with his chainsword healed up pretty fast. Behind him, Grugor struck at him with a knife. He was fast enough to not be fatally wounded, but the Plague Marine still got him in his shoulder. Decius fell to the ground and his armor started to rust and rot. When Grugor wanted to give the killing blow, Garrow saved the young Marine. Garrow and Grugor would fight for a while, the Plague Marine refusing to die. Suddenly, the Giller field started to fall, and more monstrosities decided it's a good idea to come out. Garrow ordered the deck to take them out of the warp, which was a risky move, but the warp was sending reinforcements for Grugor, and they couldn't fight them off. They jump out of the warp, and as they do, Garrow sees the Plague Marines physically lose their souls. They were now in an unpopulated part of the universe with no stars, drifting in the void and with pools of the dead next to them. Garrow and Void are walking through the ship. The Astropath, the Navigator, and the aides all fell, dead. Decius was in a terrible state, one that had Voyan at the edge of his mind. He did not have the equipment necessary to do more for him. During their talk, Garrow sensed that the apothecary disagreed with his decision to come out of the warp so quickly. Some more talks and Voyan voices displeasure, till Garrow snapped at him, saying Voyan would rather hide everything than face what has happened, and he blames his blasted lodges. Garrow realizes his words hurt the apothecary, and he tries to apologize, but Yakton was coming to them and Voyan took his leave. Yakton made a count of the fighting men they had, 70, without Voyan or Garrow or Decius. Garrow says he wants Decius on the list, because until he's dead, Decius is still his man. At the end, Yakton agrees. Next, we get a talk about how they ended up here, how Garrow feels he aged centuries. This starts a discussion of who is older, and Garrow explains how time is malleable in the warp. Next, we get Garrow's doubts, and Yakton tries to ease them by saying it's Horus's fault. Garrow asks how did this start and why. Yakton reveals everything. How Horus fell and raised thanks to the arcane, about the burning of Davin. Garen asks if the lodges had anything to do with them. And Yakton, says not only those. He talks about shadows growing the hearts of his men and how their brotherhood got exploited. Garrow thinks of Keller and tells Yakton they will be tested. Some more talks and we learn that there is a church forming on Garrow's ship. And it's growing. Next we see the church where Cinderman is writing down the sermon. He thinks of how Keller changed from a young girl into a woman that can now calm down the fears of anyone. From that moment when Jubal from the Sons of Horus turned into a demon and she managed to defeat it with her quill and faith in the Emperor alone. Cinderman became a believer at that point. He understood why religious worlds fought so strongly. He concluded that Keller was empowered by the Emperor and his divinity. Before that, he realized that Lectitio Divinatus found its place even amongst the Eisenstein's crew, and he wondered how many other worlds and ships did it find its place in. News of an Astartes coming to their chapel got to him. This reminded Cinderman of the sons of Horus when they came with bolter and clubs to destroy their chapel on the vengeful spirit, and how the remembrancers got round up and killed, and how they barely escaped. Garrow came in and Cinderman bowed before him, trembling but remaining composed, welcoming him. Garrow asks Cinderman if this is his doing. He says he is only an iterator. Keller comes and takes Garrow with her to talk. She manages to convince Garrow that they both are of purpose. Like what Caleb used to say. Strange. And Garrow reveals that he always knew about the Emperor's divinity, but he needed to come with terms with it. He always believed in it. And he pretty much agrees with her. That's the gist of it. Their part and talk is far more interesting, but in the end of this part, Garrow asks if he is the Emperor's will made flesh, and Keller says, when has Garrow been anything else? On the bridge, Voyen comes in, and he sees the Astartes and the shipmaster aren't that sure what to do next. Garrow comes in and gives the order for what they will do. Charge the warp engines until they are close to blowout and eject them into space, hoping the thrusters of the ship will make them get enough distance from the explosion. All this to create a beacon that might signal any ship of their presence, both in the warp and outside of it. Voyen disagrees to the point he pulled out a bolt pistol on Garrow, pointing it between his eyes. Garrow tells the other Astartes to lower their guns because they were prepared to save their battle captain. And he has a talk with Voyen about how sure he is of this decision. He manages to calmly take the gun from Voyen's hand and gives the order. The engines blew and the ship took some damage, but somebody in the warp might have seen it. On a different place in the ship, Garrow met with Yakten, and the Death Guard presented his testament to the Luna Wolves, which was the events of everything that happened until now. And then they talk about how Yakten thinks what Garrow did was all an act, how he presented himself like this is the solution, but he's making testaments. This testament had, of course, all the information of their journey and the betrayal. It was kind of important, and if you believed that your decision would save you, why make it? Garrow then replies that he believed the words he said, but it's never a bad idea to be prepared for the worst. That is the way their legion operates. They talk some more, and we found out Keller moved her chapel to another part of the ship that was bigger to accommodate for every new member of the sermon. Rumor has it, coming from Yakten, that even some Astartes joined. A little talk about fate and how Garrow didn't punish Voyen, and well, an interesting mention that what Garrow did by letting Keller have her church there was legitimizing her in the eyes of the Astartes. Back to Voyen not being punished. Garrow retorts that he doesn't want his legion to be synonymous with corruption, not his men, and that's why he's keeping Voyen how he is. Yakten says that he lost that opportunity for his kinsmen. Garrow went into the medical chamber of Decius and looked at his body hooked to the apparatus keeping him alive. He looked pale and almost dead, giving his last breaths, but he managed to talk somehow, surprising his battle captain. Decius didn't say anything to raise Garrow's hopes, seeming like he almost would have preferred to die than continue living. He even raised the question, what if they spent millennia and not days in the warp? What if this was for nothing? Garrow tries to raise the spirit of his young battle brother, but Decius took the black and blue pill. He ain't coming back from that. When Garrow comes out, we find out the ships are getting closer to the Eisenstein. They can't identify if they're friend or foe, or even if they are human or not, because their apparatus got broken. And so Garrow ordered everyone to be prepared for battle, but only fight at his command. They were preparing for the newly arrived fleet to come. Garrow learns everything is in order. Men are placed everywhere, the refugees are under protection, and then we get a talk between him and the shipmaster. But how superior to men the Astartes are, and sometimes how they are just like them. This was a challenging question Garrow recognized and even revealed to the shipmaster. They talked a little about weapons. Both the captain's plasma pistol and the Astartes are similar in the fact that they are tools created for war. And what would they do without war? They would probably end up fighting each other. They come to that little conclusion. And the idea of brotherly war like that, and like what Horus had done, scared Garrow. They got the reading of a scan, but it was too quick. And then Garrow realized and told his men to prepare. They were teleporting in, and teleporting on the ship were a group of Astartes that asked Garrow questions. But Garrow told them firmly, still politely, that this is his ship. They are boarding it without his authorization, and they will submit to his authority. The invaders had their bolters raised, but after Garrow spoke those words, a stoic voice apologized, and one space marine moved out of the way to reveal not a man or an Astartes, but Rogel Dorn. A thing that left all the people there surprised. Then Rogel Dorn asked if he could board Garrow's ship. He might be of use. The Imperial Fist blew up the Eisenstein. Garrow couldn't watch it. The captain did, and said that he now understands what Garrow felt at Ishvan. They blew it up because to, get rid of all that warp corruption and stuff. The captain asked and is granted his leave. Dorn then starts talking with Garrow and Yaktan, how they got lost in the warp and how they couldn't find their way, talking about the Imperial Fist. Fun fact, Yaktan had his armor painted the colors of the Luna Wolves. Dorn raised an eyebrow at this, but said nothing. Sigismund was also there, and we learn he had dark blonde hair. After Dorn finishes his tale, how they are bound to Terra to help build the fortification of the throne world, and how blinded their navigators were in the warp, he asks Garrow to tell him why their ship had Imperial damage upon it. Garrow is stuck in place at the presence of a Primarch. Also earlier, he was surprised to hear Dorn speak of the Emperor like a son with a father. Garrow searches for Yaktan's approval, the Luna Wolf nods, and Garrow begins his tale, starting from Lupercal's court to Ishvan and to this current situation. While Garrow spoke, there was silence in the room. Only Dorn moved from one side to another, sometimes looking at Garrow. Yaktan was known to intercept conversations and talk and say his point of view and stuff. But this time, he could only nod and he didn't interject like he used to. At some point, Sigismund had enough and asked how could a Warmaster permit such a thing? Do they want them to think Horus was so blind to not see it? Oh boy. Garrow tells them that Horus saw all too well, because Horus orchestrated this. Dorn moved fast. Yaktan flinched, but Dorn wasn't coming for him. It was Garrow that got punched so hard he went to the floor, his face immediately bruised and his jaw dislocated. Dorn threatened Garrow that saying such things would have him be executed. Yaktan intervened, and Dorn asked, is he giving orders to him on his ship, a relic of the past? He says yes, he is giving orders to the Primarch, because if Dorn didn't want to know the truth, Garrow would be dead and not on the floor. Dorn wants to know everything. Yaktan then saw fury in Dorn's eyes that made him think, well, they will die here. But Dorn told Garrow to continue. Garrow continues and Dorn still doesn't believe him, telling him there's really no reason why he would believe that, saying that the warp travel must have given them collective hallucinations. Garrow didn't consider he wouldn't be believed when he started this journey, which was something he should have taken into account. Dorn told him he won't do anything to them, so his brothers could take pleasure in their punishment. Garrow was stuck, and he found his strength in fate. And the best course of action was to call him blind. Wait, what? Garrow called Dorn blind. Oh, Dorn got furious, taking out his chain blade.
Rogel Dorn's colossal chain blade, too weighty for any but an elite sisterhood. raised from infancy to adore the Leviathan at his disposal, expanding ever outward to onlookers, less a flesh length, but rather some unstoppable agency of the sire of the Imperial Fist made manifest. Woman after woman incapacitated or stunned, Dawn's phenomenally resilient organic matter requiring specialized medical and alchemical gear to prevent an ever greater death toll, mounting from each massive blast of his equipment. Dozens of women requiring extensive augmentic rebuild per engagement. Not even death can stay the breathtaking torsion crusher beneath the auric armor. Indeed, the blood of martyrs only strengthens the resolve of Dawn, making it harden his war gear to the point of overstraining the armor's exoskeleton.
Dorn told Garrow to at least take his death with honor. But to his rescue came Keller, Cinderman, and the Remembrancer that came with them, whose name I can neither spell nor say right now. They came to their rescue. Keller told Dorn there is proof of everything. The Remembrancer had a good memory and good apparatus in her to record everything, and so she showed the awful experience on the vengeful spirit of Horus falling, and showed the Imperial Fists and Dorn the true horrors of Ishvan. Needless to say, they were all disgusted. Dorn ordered everybody to leave him alone and to keep this a secret from the rest of the fleet. Outside Dorn's chambers, Garrow saw Keller shed a tear and asked if she is crying for them. She said, "For him, Nathaniel, because he can't. Today you and I have broken a brother's heart, and nothing will ever mend it." Garrow went to Keller's room, and they talked about Caleb's writings that made him understand what Keller and her followers are. After some more talk, Garrow is 100% on board with the Emperor's divinity. He thought the idea of him, of all Astartes being chosen and protected by the Emperor, to be hubris. But what other answer could there be for all this experience they went through and how they survived? Nice talk where Keller helps Garrow with his mind. Pretty good. Next we go with Garrow and Yakton that meet the captains of the Imperial Fists. Rumors have it that Dorn's chambers have been tumultuous, at best, lately. Damage being done here and there. Those are only rumors. Dorn comes in the chamber with the captains and tells them, or his captains, about what they will do. Part of them will go to Terra to relay the message. Another part, led by Sigismund, will go to the Ishvan system to see what is happening. Sigismund asks his Primar what to do if everything is true about the betrayal about Horus. Dorn answers, "Tell him his brother Rogel will have him answer for it." Garrow goes to the Medicae of the Phalanx, the flagship of the Imperial Fist and of Rogel Dorn. There he looks at Decius and his color fading from him. Voyn is also there and tells Garrow how the virus turned into an airborne contagion now and he needs to be isolated. And how Decius has talked once or twice and both times have been incoherent, shouting battle orders. Garrow says that is good, that he's fighting for his life. When he wants to take his leave, Voyn stops him. He gets in front of Garrow and presents him his combat knife, feeling remorse for the both times he had betrayed his battle captain, and saying he accepts any punishment Garrow wants. Garrow, being a good guy, now tells him he understands why he did that. It was out of fear of the unknown, and offers him faith in the Emperor as a guiding light, giving him Caleb's tracts. Next we move to Garrow arriving to the chambers of Dorn, where the Primarch awaited alongside another Space Marine and Yakton. The Phalanx had visitors. It was the black ships of the Sisters of Silence. And, funnily enough, it was the same black ship of the same Sister of Silence that Garrow fought with, Amadera Kendall. Dorn interrogates Garrow about how the Sisters in Malcador know of Keller, and accuses him of bringing a witch-spawn psyker out on his ship. The men of the Eisenstein will not get to bring their message to Terra because they will be held at the Luna, at the Sisters of Silence fortress. Of course, Neither Garo nor Yaktan take this lightly because they swore to protect Keller and the rest of the men with them. And, the Fortress of Luna, dubious things might happen there. Dorn talks about his justifications for all this. Despite seeing the pic recording, he can only trust what an Imperial Fist has seen. Garo and Yaktan try to argue that they are not traitors, but they get shut down because their legions might have gone renegade. And this position puts them at risk. What if they came to kill the Council of Terra and the Emperor with a psyker, or with a disease that apparently no one can cure or understand? After some more talks, Garo gives up and offers Dorn his sword, much in the same way Voyen did his combat knife, and tells the Primarch to take his life rather than be insulted so. But this doesn't work with Dorn, and Garo accepts they will be taken to Luna and wait for Dorn to go to Terra and talk with the Emperor and Malcador. We get a description of Luna and how important it was before the Age of Strife and how it has fallen and coming back to its current position. Yellow stormbirds flew to the satellite, each one carrying the members of the Eisenstein, those 70. Garo looked upon Terra and wondered how long it has been since he was last home, and if there was a boy looking up to the sky the same way he did. Garo talks to one of his sergeants, and of course, Hakur, and he isn't that pleased with the situation. It looks more like they are prisoners than messengers. Yaktan, Voyen, and Decius were on another Stormbird, and of Cinderman, Keller, and the Remembrancer they knew nothing. Garo reassured him, saying they are going to the same place, the Somnus Citadel, the fortress of the Sisters of Silence. We get a scene between an Imperial Fist captain telling Hakur to go back to his place, and Hakur refusing. Of course, Hakur does go to his place once Garo asks him to. The Imperial Fist captain asks if all of his men are like this, to which Garo answers, "Of course, we are Death Guard. It's in our nature." They reach Luna and the Citadel. Garo comes out first of the Stormbird, though protocol demanded that the captain of the Imperial Fist be first to disembark. Garo was done with such pleasantries. Awaiting them were the Sisters of Silence, each from a different branch. They greeted each other as the men fell into parade formation. The captain of the Imperial Fist took Garo aside to discuss separately, basically telling him that the captain empathizes with Garo, but that he also should understand that these actions were taken by Dorn for the betterment of the Imperium, and if Garo's honor had to suffer for it, then the captain expects his counterpart, his kinsman, to understand that is a small sacrifice. Garo retorts that his honor is all he has left after his Primarch and the rest of his legion turned traitor, and his honored battle brothers died. Another Stormbird came with Voyen, Decius, and Yaktan. Yaktan joined into formation. Decius was transported to the Medicae. Garo asked about Decius and found out they were taking him. Of course, the way they put it sounded more like they would experiment on him like some xenopsyker. He opposed that but was assured everything will be fine. Next came the Stormbird with Keller, Cinderman, and the Remembrancer Mersadi, the one that showed during the pictures. Okay, they were escorted by the same branch of the Sisters of Silence that Garo fought with, led by none other than Amedera Kendo. Of course, the woman Garo spoke with at the end of the Yorgal annihilation. Of course, the situation was a little bit tense with Garo and Yaktan saying that those three are under their protection. But they got rebuked because this was the Sisters' fortress. Keller seemed to not be disturbed by everything happening, and even stopped Garo and Yaktan from starting a fight with the Sisters, saying that they are where they are supposed to be. The Sisters of Silence tell them they are guests and would be treated properly, but all they ask is for them to act with the honor an Astartes is known for. Also, Kendo would have Garo's word of this. After some time, Garo gave his word. This whole discussion was done using one of the sister interpreters. Guess which one? Of course, the one from the whole Yorgal situation. After that ordeal, days passed, and Garo was troubled by thoughts about their prison. Because in truth, it was a prison. Garo thought of the ways he could escape it, and then he thought of how far away they are from the Warmaster's treachery. But he resumed to having faith in the Emperor. Next part is Decius being in pain and an entity mocking him, telling him how he has become weak thanks to Garo. In the end, the entity gave him the choice of death or never being weak again. Decius chose to be strong, and the Astartes once known as Solun Decius was gone. In his place now stood a creature more akin to a parody of the Astartes, with bug-like features and a swarm of insects flying around him. The Lord of the Flies broke from his enclosure and looked for something to kill. During their time in the fortress, the members of the Death Guard kinda got bored and decided it's a good idea to have shifts on watching Decius, not only to cure their boredom in a way, but also to not let the young boy die by himself. One of them came to switch places, but he found the smell of blood and rotting flesh, and Decius' capsule broken. Oh, that doesn't sound nice. He tried to alert Hakur, but was stopped as a claw dragged him. At some point, the Death Guard found his footing and went for the strike against the insect-looking creature in front of him. But his blow stopped as he realized it was Decius. Or, as the insect responded, not anymore. Garo heard a woman calling for him, and he realized it was Skeller. He looked as though he was sick. Voin tried to ask him what was wrong, and Garo told him about Keller sending a warning. Hakur immediately came in, who would have thought, and told him of the lost Death Guard in the medical bay. Garo gave orders to get his men, and they went there directly. Garo, Yacht, and Hakur and a squad of men went to the infirmary, and there they found the dead bodies of the 2 Death Guard that died there, the broken pot of Decius, and the shedded skin of the Lord of the Flies. Moving on, they found the hospice of the Sisters of Silence. All patients there had been infected with different diseases and left to die, as in a cruel mockery of things. But it wasn't only the body that was diseased, it was also the metal. The metal got corroded. Next they went to the landing bay close to the hospice, made so that the sisters could carry their injured directly to the infirmary. There, Sisters of Battle fought against insects and a mutant. The Astartes joined in to help them. Kendo was there, and she signaled to Garo that the nature of the enemy was unknown. Garo told her to let the Astartes face the mutant. Garo expected and knew in his heart who the mutant was. The Decius thing mocked Garo by telling him he has healed. Garo asked him why would he give in to this creature. The Decius thing answered that he did so because Decius thought he got abandoned by his battle brothers. Of course, the Lord of the Flies judged Garo for not killing Decius when he had the chance. Garo refers to the Emperor as the God Emperor during this exchange, which is pretty interesting and nice. Next comes an epic battle scene that you must really read. It starts in the hangar but then ends up on the surface of Luna, where Garo and the Lord of the Flies fight in hand-to-hand combat. I really like this. At some point, the Abomination has the upper hand, and Garo almost gives up until a voice tells him he is of purpose. And that burst of faith revitalizes Garo, and he manages to kill the insect thing with his sword, Libertas. During their fight, the Lord of the Flies said that you cannot kill decay. Those words sounded in Garo's head after the battle, but his conclusion was that, we'll see about that. After he looked at Terra, he made the sign of the Aquila, and said he is ready for what the Emperor has planned for him. Garo meditated in his robes sometime afterwards. The words of the Lectitio Divinatus on his lips, Libertas at his side, and Caleb's brass icon in his hand. A group of sisters came to him and called him to a chamber. There he met with Sister Kendo and Yakton. They were called there by none other than Malkador the Sigillite. The Regent Lord of Terra told Garo that his hope of delivering the message about Horus's betrayal to the Emperor is impossible. Not personally, at least. The Emperor is indisposed at the moment. Garo then gives a speech about how he needs a purpose. Malcador says the Imperium is going to need some inquisitive people to take care of the traitor, the Xenos, the mutant, the heretic, and asks the three if they are ready. Garrow says that they are ready, and he is ready. After that is done, Garrow went to Voyen, and he saw the apothecary was missing the symbols of his legion on his robes. Voyen told Garrow he was shocked, deeply moved by everything he saw, from Horus's betrayal to what Decius and Grulgor became, and he felt responsible for that. Garrow tried to tell him he wasn't, but Voyen wouldn't hear of it. He gave Garrow his lodge badge, squashed as it was. He said Garrow was right about the lodges. Voyen decided he would renounce his status as a Death Guard to join the Apothecary Major on Terra and look for a cure for Decius' malady. Garrow agreed, and they parted ways like brothers. This all comes thanks to Voyen's eyes being opened by the Lectitio Divinatus. The final part has Garrow overlooking Terra, and Keller coming to see him, though she looked more exhausted. Garrow asked if it was her that called for him when Decius turned into a demon. She doesn't give a straight answer, but says they are connected and that their bonds and the bonds of others will be tested. The book ends with Garrow and Keller looking at Terra and praying.